Hello and welcome back to my channel. I'm going to be doing a 48-hour reading vlog as part of the Whateverthon reading challenge. There's a whole bingo board of prompts that you can do in order to get points, which you can see here. I am actually going to be doing all of this in 48 hours. I am only going to be reading graphic novels. So the personal goal that I'm going to use for this block is any book that I complete without breaking the gap. The first book I completed was Heartstopper by Alice Oseman. This is a YA contemporary romance following two teenage boys who wind up playing rugby together. One of them has been on the rugby team and he is known to be a popular athlete. The other one is more of a reserved drummer guy who happens to be able to run. So he gets put on the rugby team because Nick wants to spend more time with him, even though Nick might not understand why he wants to spend more time with him just yet. If you want something that's feel good, has just like the cute, sweetest, most innocent, lovable little romance, then you will definitely love Heartstoppers, and it does have the sports aspect as well. The only thing that some readers may not like is that there are several instances where Charlie is bullied, and there are instances where someone who is in his past as a partner, in a sense, becomes very aggressive in trying to basically have his way with Charlie. But other than that, I think you'll really enjoy the story if you're just looking for a cute, sweet romance. Heartstoppers met all 5 of the prompts that were the gray ones that were activity type prompts. It also met favorite genre, which I chose to be romance because I needed to select something to make it fair. So I picked romance. It's also a one-word title, and it's a host favorite. This was a very hard category for me to find a graphic novel for because there were only 3 choices out of the host faves that were graphic novels, which was Heartstoppers, Battle Royale, and Death Note. Heartstoppers was one I had already looked into. I wanted to read it after watching the TV show in like one day, so of course that was my obvious pick. The next book that I read was The Great Gatsby. I don't read classics, but there was a graphic novel of it, and it was the only book I could find there that was a graphic novel that was published in 2021. Now, of course, the original story, Great Gatsby, was not published in 2021, but this graphic novel adaptation was. So it gets to be my 2021 category. It also gets to be on a previous TBR because I've read it before. I didn't read this version, but I did read The Great Gatsby, and because I don't really do traditional TBRs, except for now that I'm starting to do them for the channel, I don't really know what's been on a previous TBR for me, so I just went with like a reread or something like that. So this is kind of like a reread, so we're going for it. The Great Gatsby. And then it also worked for title, where it's the last letter becomes the first letter. So the last novel that I had finished was Spring Rising. So when I went to pick my next book, it was The Great Gatsby. Technically, I read over 200 pages out of like the 229 that are in here. I read them before picking up Heartstopper. So I technically did finish Heartstopper first, but I started this one before Heartstopper. So it did follow the last letter becomes first letter with the G. I'm not counting the V because if you put this in alphabetical order, it would go under the G. So G from Rising, Great Gatsby. There we go. Bam! And of course it fit the other 5 prompts that you get that are grayed out as well. There were so many things in this book that I had completely forgotten from reading it in high school. There was also a scene that I remembered from The Great Gatsby where they're on the road and I guess they're being chased or something and they turn off their headlights. Am I being confused and that was from a different series that I was reading, or was that part of The Great Gatsby? Because I linked it to being like my favorite scene from The Great Gatsby. I didn't hate The Great Gatsby when I was in high school. It was one of the few required readings that were classics that I actually read the whole way through and did pretty well with tests and stuff, despite all of the metaphors, and we had to memorize what the colors represented and all this other kind of stuff, whatever. The graphic novel changes a few things, which you can see whenever you read the author's notes. She takes out some of the anti-Semitism that was represented in F. Scott Fitzgerald's original book. She did not shy away from the racism or the abuse that the character Tom does throughout the book. So you do see him talk about white supremacy. At least on 2 occasions, you also see him break his mistress's nose. And there is one scene that alludes to him possibly breaking plates. There's a scene where there's shattered porcelain, where he gets mad at his wife. He's not a good guy. Nick is not a great guy either, because he is all fine with facilitating Daisy and Mr. Gatsby getting it on. You don't see any panels with them getting it on in here, but you can pretty much figure out they're having an affair, okay? At one point, she, says, "I love you," and the husband's just in the other room. Y'all don't care if you get caught, but also, I can't blame the woman because he is an abusive prick. And he flaunts that he has these relationships with these other women in front of her. So it's you're going to dish it out, you're going to take it. If you're going to have mistresses, then she's going to have a guy. Now, she did have a previous relationship with Gatsby before he went off to war. So there's also that whole thing with that was her true love. But then she wound up with this other guy. And I think that her child is actually Gatsby's child, especially with the way that it was illustrated in the book, because he looks just like the two of them. And the timing. The timing. I think Gatsby was the dad. Then the thing that happens to him at the end with the scorned guy who, oh my gosh. Okay, so here comes the real spoilers for you people. So go ahead and use the timestamps if you haven't read this story. I've already told you a couple things, but I feel like people kind of know the general bits. I'm going to get into the death. All right, I'm going to get into the 2 deaths. So if you don't want to know who dies in this book, you need to skip to the next section. Okay, the deaths. Oh, okay. So Daisy is driving, and she runs over her husband's mistress in the road and just keeps going. Hit and run! Oh my gosh. When I saw it, I thought that her husband was the one that was driving, and he was mad because his wife had figured out that he was having an affair. So then he just wanted to punish the mistress, and he just killed her. But it wasn't. It was him. It was her. She was driving. He wasn't even in the car. Gatsby was in the car in the passenger seat, or so we are told. We don't actually see it didn't look like a close-up panel where I could tell who was driving. I just noticed the car. Well, the husband knows that this is Tom's car, or thought that it was Tom's car because he was driving it to the shop. And so Tom is like, "No, man, I know you saw me in that car, but it's not mine. It's this Gatsby dude. The Gatsby dudes who ran over your wife." So he then, so this guy, his wife had ran out into the middle of the street, so it wasn't completely Daisy's fault. She was caught off guard. She ran out in the street because he had locked her up in her bedroom because he had figured out that she was cheating on him with Tom. And he's like, "You're not going to take away all my business because you're sleeping with patrons." So he locks her up in a room, and then she gets ran over by a car. And then he wants to exact his revenge, so when he finds out that it was Gatsby's car, he assumes that Gatsby was the one driving and that killed his wife. So Gatsby is in his pool outside, and the guy comes up to him after walking all the way to his house, shoots him dead in the pool, and then shoots himself. I didn't remember that. How did I not remember that from the book? And then no one goes to Gatsby's funeral, okay? Like, hundreds of people would come to his parties. They appreciated his wealth, but they obviously didn't appreciate him. And also, Gatsby was involved in some illegal activity, but he's never shown as any sort of immoral character aside from the fact that he is going after Daisy. But we don't even, we excuse that because we know that they had a previous relationship and she never should have wound up with Tom anyway. So it's like you make Gatsby into being this character who gets away with everything and is looked at as this outstanding guy, but he's not. And he dies, and nobody goes to his funeral except for the guy that admired his book collection. Oh my gosh. Okay. So yeah. I give The Great Gatsby 2 stars. I already know that I'm going to regret this. Oh. So I needed a guilt-free activity, and that is going to be like getting in pajamas and laying down early to read. And it'll also work for my cozy read. But the thing that I'm going to regret is the story that I chose. This is a bad idea, but I'm doing it anyway. Through the Woods. This is a horror graphic novel with like dismemberment and bloody stuff. Yeah, it's supposed to be very scary. There's like 5 different little stories in here. I hope I don't have nightmares. It is the next morning. I do not regret reading this at nighttime. The images were like kind of spooky and everything, and the stories were spooky, but it's like the author brought them to the climactic point or to the first main twist and then just failed to deliver on the ending. There was like no denouncement at all for the stories. So I give this a 1 star. I'm like, hey, I get that at the end of thrillers or horror movies or something like that, you might have like a hand shoot out of the grave, or you catch a shadow in a mirror or something like that. That's the bad guy. And you're like, oh my gosh, they're not really dead. But this didn't do that. It didn't escalate it to the fear point, and it didn't take it where they felt super comfortable either, and then giving you your last and final scare. It didn't do that. It just took it to the climax, gave you a little bit of spookiness, and then just stopped. And some of the stories just didn't feel even halfway done. So I didn't like it. It's a 1 star. The illustrations were good, but other than that, it just did not feel complete to me. So I cannot give it more than a 1 star. Through the Woods met all of the bonus activity type prompts, and it also met 3 of the other prompts that I assigned for it. It was under 300 pages. It's a spooky book, and horror is one of my least read genres. So those are the 3 categories that I used. As you can see, I have made quite a bit of progress on the bingo board. In order to complete the rest, I will have to read another 3 books because you're restricted to 3 categories per book that you can have on there. So I need to read a minimum of 4 more. There's 5 minutes left of the first sprints for Gavin's stream. I have the hiccups, but I did finish Stranger Things. Erica the Great. I would give this like a 2.5. I did like it, but at the same time, I was expecting it to be spooky, like Stranger Things, and it just wasn't. All it was Erica's mom wants her to start spending more time with her friends and doesn't like that she spends a lot of time playing Dungeons and Dragons by herself. And she's like, I don't disapprove of the activity, I just wish you would do it with your friends like your brother Lucas does. So she convinces her friends to play Dungeons and Dragons with her, but none of them like the characters that she's made for them, and they just feel like she's being bossy as the dungeon master, not listening to what their wants are. They want to be different types of characters and so forth. Then one of the girls gets jealous of all the attention Erica's getting, and Erica's the higher level person, so she's the only one that can really defend against certain villains. So she goes home and steals her mother's parakeet and brings it to the party. And then when they're fighting, the parakeet gets loose. So now the Dungeons and Dragons game is bleeding into the real world, because in the game they were trying to save a unicorn, and now they are having to save a parakeet. And they turn one of the neighbors into like a witch, and they turn her dog into Cerberus, and they turn the parakeet into a phoenix. So it does kind of make it be more fantastical. And then the girls start to enjoy the game of D&D because Erica is doing a better job of being the game master, and they just learn to have teamwork in this story. So I think it was good middle grades. I wouldn't necessarily give it the 3-star because it just didn't feel like Stranger Things. It had the D&D, but that was really one of the only similarities. And then, of course, Erica is Lucas's sister, but that was it. So for it to be Stranger Things, I just expected a little bit more. So I would say that this is like a 2.5. I haven't really done any half stars this year, but if I was going to start, it would be with this book. So I don't know what I'm going to officially rate it as, but that's what I'm going for right now. So now my bingo board is looking awesome. It is almost completed. So Stranger Things, Erica the Great, knocked off. Borrow it book, because I did check it out from the library, so I do have to return it, so it's a borrowed book. It's also recently hauled because I picked it up from the library yesterday. That's about as recent as you could possibly get. And it also covered weapon on the cover. As you can see, she has a sword on the cover. So, yes! And the other cool thing is that this book does have diversity with race. So I will get bonus points for reading a book that includes diversity. So I'm starting to be more aware. I used to read books and it might have like all white characters, all straight characters, and I just didn't notice, or it didn't bother me that there wasn't more. But now it started to get to the point where it kind of bothers me if there's not any diversity at all. Like if there's no one that's not white, or like if there's not even like mental disabilities mentioned, because let's face it, a lot of people have stuff like depression and anxiety disorders. So for there to be like 8 different areas that you can draw from when it comes to diversity, for none of those to be included, it's just, it seems like it makes the characters flat if nobody falls under any of those categories. And I even consider some stuff that other people wouldn't consider to be diverse reads, like having a plus-size character, because it's just rare to see it. So if it's some sort of representation that I don't often see, I would include that as being a diverse read. And lately, I haven't even been seeing the minimal effort being made, which is really sad. But anyway, the sprints are over, so I'm going to join back in on the fun. There will be more sprints, just the first sprint is over. So I'm going to go do the rest of the documenting in my little bujo, and I will check back in with you. I don't know what I'm reading next. I might do like an instant poll, because one of the prompts that I need to do is a poll book. So I will probably give them 2 options of what I need to read. I just finished The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. I did read the original classic probably when I was in like 4th or 5th grade for fun. I thought it was interesting, and I remember I did like it. I don't know if I ever finished the book or not. But anyway, I just read the graphic novel. It was interesting as well, but it also kind of felt like the Through the Woods, where you kind of get to the climactic point, but you don't actually see what happens, and then the story kind of ends. So it's like, okay, did he get killed by the Headless Horseman? Or was he just spooked by all of the stories of the villagers telling him about the Headless Horseman and all of these other spooky things like ghost, and then he just ran off into the night? You don't really know. And then it kind of ends with the school children telling the next guy, that's the schoolmaster, about the Headless Horseman. So the previous schoolmaster had also disappeared. So I'm kind of thinking it might be one of those things where the schoolmaster just left because he was terrified. But I don't know, and I can't remember far back enough to know the details of the actual classic, which may have covered a lot more ground and explained things a bit better. So I think I am going to give this would be like another 1 star, I guess, just because it didn't feel complete. I didn't get anything from it. I completed all of the extra activity type prompts with this story as well. That's why I'm just still in my pajamas, super cozy, relaxing, reading in bed during these sprints. It also met the box for the, and, of, a, or and as like the first word in the title, or maybe it just had to have one of those in the title, but I used it as the first word was the. It was also a hybrid genre, which was super hard for me to figure out what to read for that, because it is horror and it is also a classic. So those are like 2 different genres. And so it worked out that I had a graphic novel that fitted. So thank goodness for The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. And then lastly, I also used this for my poll pick immediately before the sprint. I did like an instant poll using the Discord server. The votes were unanimous. It was like 20 votes for The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. Nobody voted for Twilight graphic novel number 1, which I do have to read Twilight, the volume 1 and volume 2 in order to complete my board, because one of the prompts is a series continuation. And since I'm doing these in graphic novels, that is how I'm going to get the continuation. So I have to read the first one, and then I can go into the second one. I could technically skip the first one and just go straight to the second one, but I'm also going to be doing another bingo board. So by using Twilight, it will work for the first letter, last letter challenge. So what I will probably do is use my prompts for Twilight Volume 1, and I will go ahead and mark them on my second bingo board, and use the prompts for Twilight Volume 2 for my first bingo board, which has 4 spaces left for me to fill in. So this one I had put in Sleepy Hollow and realized strategically I needed it somewhere else. You can only use 3 prompts for each book, so that's why I whited it out. But I will wind up completing that. I just need a story that has blue on the cover. That's not going to be too hard. Turns out it would be a little harder than I thought, because neither of these have blue on the cover. However, I do think they're below 300 pages. So what I will wind up doing is taking Through the Woods off of the prompt that was read a book under 300 pages, and instead use it for color on the cover It didn't have to be the majority of the cover that had the color on it. It simply just had to be on the cover. And the color that was chosen for me through polls was blue, and Through the Woods did have a tiny bit of blue on it, which you can see right here. It's also on the back cover a bit more prominently. So I will switch those to where this one now is blue on the cover, and then I will use Twilight 1 for under 300 pages. So I'll swap those. But that is going to be the next story that I get into. The sprints have 5 minutes left of this round, so I am going to go use the restroom, take a little bit of a break, and then it will start back up in a bit, and I will read Twilight Volume 1, which is just about going to close it out. I also needed to switch one more prompt, which is a good thing I haven't logged any of these officially for the readathon, so I could switch up what category it needs to go to be strategic as much as I want, and then I'll figure out how many points everything is. As you can see, I've already made a couple of bingos. I made a bingo here. I made a bingo here. Here. Those are the bingos that I've made because I took away these 2 prompts that I had. So I still need to do those 2, and I need to do these 2. So the last one I switched was I had Erica the Great for Borrow a Book, and I switched her to purple cover because I just was not paying enough attention. And as you can see, there's a lot of the pinky purples in her clothing, and there's also definitely a purple skirt right there. So it has lots of like pinky purples on the cover. And also on the back cover with her friend, there's a ton of purple. So, yeah, this is going to be a purple cover. So, the sprints are now, this sprint is now over, so it's the chat session. So, I'm just going to get ready for reading Volume 1 of Twilight, and I will see y'all back in a bit. Hopefully this is under 300 pages. I'll have to look it up. I just finished Twilight Volume 1, the graphic novel. I was definitely part of the whole Twilight hype when it was happening. The first movie came out and I was like, I don't want to watch that. That just looks like it'll be super cheesy. But one of my friends told me that I would love it, so I watched it 3 times in one night. And then I read all of the books. I even had to wait for the 3rd and 4th book to be released. So I was not at the very beginning, since I didn't know about Twilight until the movie came out. But at the height of its popularity, that's when I was involved with the whole Twilight thing. I have a Twilight blanket. I have a Twilight board game. I even had Twilight sweet tarts. So, like, when I say I was involved with the Twilight fandom, I am serious. However, I was 18 years old when I first experienced the movie and then started reading the books. I am now 32 years old. I give this book a 3-star simply because at this point, at this stage in my life, I can recognize all of the gaslighting and kind of mental manipulation and, let's just say, emotional abuse that Edward inflicts on her, and also her just being completely okay with the way that she's being treated. There are instances at the beginning of the book where she stands up for herself and she's like, oh, so you want to talk to me now? But that strength doesn't really carry through, and she just lets him make all the decisions. She's like, oh, you want to be friends? Okay, now we can be friends. And it's like, okay, he ignored you for 6 weeks. Like, that is super manipulative and just wrong and not a healthy relationship. So I had to make a concerted effort to look past those issues in order to enjoy this. I just remember Edward and Bella are meant to be, they'll be fine, and I understand that he's like pushing her away for these reasons. Everything that he does is to be in the best interest of Bella, but it's just the fact that he's making all these decisions and she's left in the dark. I'm not okay with that. So it's a 3-star, not a 5-star. I don't think if I reread the whole Twilight series, that it would be 5 stars, because it would, at least not for the first book when she's completely in the dark. And then, of course, in the second book either, because he makes another decision. Or it might have been the third book where he makes that decision. I don't remember. It's been a long time. But yeah, 3 stars for this. I don't think I need to explain anything about Twilight, but just in case you haven't heard about it, it's about 2 teenagers. So one of them happens to be a vampire, and the other one's blood just smells so good to him that he wants to make out with her and kill her at the same time. So yeah, that's Twilight. There's not really a lot of diversity in here. I think the movie kind of made it more so. There was the Native American tribe that's in it, and you can't really tell the ethnicity of Tyler, who you could in the movie. It's a little more vague in the illustrations in this one, where it's kind of ambiguous. So there's not much to speak of in terms of diversity, and some Native Americans do not like the portrayals of the Native Americans in the story. So, you know, you make your own determinations when going into books. It did come out before like 2008, before social media, before all of the information was more readily available as far as to look into like what are racial stereotypes and how do you avoid them. Things have changed a lot since 2008 when I was a high schooler. So when I noticed that, I'm like, okay, I can give a little more leeway for books that even were published before like 2015. I can give a little bit of leeway. After that, I'm just like, okay, you've had the internet at your fingertips and there's social media, so you should be interacting with people that don't come from the same like class or race, ethnicity, all that kind of stuff. Like, you have enough connections with people outside of your own bubble to where you kind of learn these things without even having to do research. So yeah, anyway, just be aware of that. I did like it. I just really had to look past all the gaslighting because I'm just not okay with it at all. Oh, okay. Now moving on to volume 2. Where hopefully there will be one more sprint for the Whateverthon. We've been going since like 9 o'clock this morning, and it is now 1 o'clock. So I don't know how long these sprints are going to happen, but I definitely need them to propel me forward. Volume 2 will be the last book needed in order to complete the bingo board. This one here knocked off Borrow a Book, because I did check it out from the library. It also knocked off Under 300 Pages. It was like 225. And it knocked off a different format because it's a graphic novel, so it's not a standard. So yeah, I'm almost done with my board. I finished volume 2. I gave this one a 4-star. There was a little bit less of the gaslighting, but it's still kind of in there because of the whole controversy over him not wanting to turn her kind of towards at the end of it. And yeah, there's just little things here and there, but it wasn't quite as much as in volume 1. I don't plan on continuing the graphic novel series, but I do think it did a good job of adapting. It took out some scenes that were in the movie, and it included some stuff that I don't think was in the movie, so that's pretty cool. Like, it had one of the blood scenes, but in here, he wasn't in the room for that, and I felt like he was in the room in the book. I can't remember. It's been so long since I've read, like, the novels. But anyway, if you're a Twilight fan, I think you definitely enjoy the graphic novel adaptations. The art was really pretty. It did strip some of the diversity that was in the movies, but that tends to kind of be the case where the movies and TV programs tend to be a little bit more diverse than their original content. And it also made Bella a brunette, according to the cover. In the book, she's a blonde, and then in the movie, she's brunette. It's just like, I like that it's mostly black and white, But then in certain parts where they're in the light, you actually get color panels for their eye colors when they change sometimes, or just if it's a beautiful setting, you might get some color images, especially at the end of the book. Basically anything that takes place at twilight where they can be out in the sun, you'll see colored images. So yeah, that concludes my 48-hour vlog, which wound up only being 24 hours to the T. It is 3:15 p.m. right now, so I am done. Here are all the books that I read in the 24 hours, and I also read Heartstopper's Volume 1 as an ebook, so it was a little bit more than this. But there you go. There's all the books that I did. For a recap, we had The Great Gatsby, Through the Woods, Stranger Things, Erica the Great, Twilight Volume 1, Twilight Volume 2, and The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. It is late at night. I've already ended the vlog several hours ago, but I am popping in to give you some stats. So during the 24-hour of reading that I did for my impromptu 48-hour challenge, which I just reduced to 24 hours because I just wanted to stick with the graphic novels, I read 1,315 graphic novel pages. All of those were physical, none of it was audiobooks. That's a lot of freaking pages. And because I was very strategic and I filled the entire board using those 7 books, it meant all the prompts plus 2 prompts on round 2 of the board. Because you can't get new bingos until you completely fill the board. So for my team points that I earned, I made sure I did 3 reading prompts for each one, since that was the max. And then I hit all 5 categories for the non-reading prompts, except for I had forgot that with Through the Woods, there was not any sprints going on at the time. I had went to bed. The sprints had just ended. So even though I put in the video that I got all 5, I did not. I got 4. So I tracked that and I already registered it, submitted the form, and it had 4 on there. I also didn't count the diversity point for The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. It did have a couple of characters who were plus size, but it didn't play into the story at all, so I just didn't feel right giving that a diversity check mark, so I didn't. So 2 of the books fit under the LGBTQ+. 1, the book was LGBT, and then 1, the author was, but the book was not. But it still counted for LGBT. As far as non-LGBT diversity, 4 of the 7 books had it. Regardless of how shallow it was there. And so my total points that I got for completing the entire bingo board, and also those additional bonus points, I got 8,775 points for Shelf Slayers. And that was in the first 24 hours. So one day. One day. And I've already read 100 pages of my first novel that I'm going into for the month. So I am trying to get another bingo board done. I don't know if it's going to happen, but we shall see. Please let me know down below if you've read any of these books and if you enjoyed them, or if you haven't read any of them, do you plan on reading them now? I'm curious. If you made it to the end of this video, give me an apple emoji in the comments to let me know you made it this far. I just think the apple's cool because of the whole Twilight with the first cover with the apple. So, apple emoji. Thanks for watching. Definitely more books that I will be reading this month, so stay tuned for that. I may do more of a weekly type wrap-up because I do read so many books each month, and I want to keep the videos relatively decent as far as length. But I will see y'all in the next one. Bye!